Hey guys, so I thought I was done with the Jeet Kune conversation, but I think there was still some loose ends I need to tie up. So over communication sometimes is the best way to get things across. So let me just kind of quickly summarize everything I said in the past two videos and add anything that I didn't already put there as well. So I started with saying that Jeet Kune started under Sijo Bruce Lee, Sijo being an honorific title meaning founder or father, and it was actually part of his martial arts evolution, starting with him doing Wing Chun at the age of 13 in Hong Kong, and that combined with some other Chinese martial arts, he brought with him to the States, and in college started teaching them to a group of friends. At that time, it was mostly just Wing Chun and those other kung fu styles, and he called that style Tao of Kung Fu. Um, but after some fight that he got into with another uh, Chinese martial artist of reportedly great skill, he was dissatisfied with the outcome of the fight, and it's still hearsay what actually happened at that fight. But we do know that he was dissatisfied with his performance in it, and so he started cross training, and he added uh, boxing and studied epee fencing and looking at how they move and added that to his own martial art, and that became Jun Fan Kung Fu. Now, his original students from the era in Seattle when he was teaching Tao of Kung Fu, and later in the Bay Area of California when he developed Jun Fan Kung Fu. Later on in the late 80s, early 90s, started teaching folks and calling it original Jeet Kune Do, which was just false because Jeet Kune Do was its own thing, um, which also goes into the common misunderstanding that the Jeet Kune Do was just a philosophy of Bruce Lee and not an actual martial art. It was a martial art with its own curriculum, its own techniques and concepts and all of that. So that's false. So fast forward to 1967, Bruce is still researching martial arts like voraciously, like a lot. And like I said, it was rumored that there was 26 styles that influenced Jeet Kune Do, but there are some heavy hitters in it. Like the fact that he called it Jeet Kune Do or art of the intercepting fist shows a heavy emphasis on some things that he got from styles like French savate boxe française, which is French kickboxing savate. The way he kicked and moved and put emphasis on intercepting the other person, instead of relying on blocking or defending or head movements, shows that it was a heavy emphasis from the savate. Um, so when later on in the early 2000s, when the Bruce Lee estate had a falling out with Dan Inosanto and his instructors about Jeet Kune Do, because they wanted to copyright the martial arts and anything associated with Bruce Lee, which is understandable because unfortunately when Bruce Lee died, everyone was out making a dime on his name, pretending they taught his martial art or they knew him and this and that, and everyone but the family was making money. The family went broke at the time, sad to say. So, well, I won't say broke, but they weren't wealthy as they should have been, being that when he died, he was the highest paid actor in the world. But anyway, so in 1967, Jeet Kune Do was developed by Bruce Lee. It involved a heavy emphasis on savate, boxing, um, still some Wing Chun Kung Fu, but it was much less so. So Tao of Kung Fu would have been about 80% Wing Chun Kung Fu. Jun Fan Kung Fu is about 50% Wing Chun, Kung Fu, and other Kung Fu styles. Much less so in Jeet Kune Do. I can't say what percentage, but uh, it went down over time because the early Jeet Kune Do, there was still a lot of emphasis on the Wing Chun trapping skills, which is like the close fighting techniques um, that are practiced in Wing Chun and other Southern martial arts styles that place heavy emphasis on on the hands and using trapping skills and being able to basically immobilize a person's arms and hands while you strike them. That's trapping. Okay, because I know some people don't know what I mean when I say trapping. Immobilizing the other person's arm or leg while you strike them. That's trapping. So early Jeet Kune Do still did that. Later on, it was removed from the curriculum, according to Dan DeSanto in later interviews. He said when Bruce came back from Hong Kong filming his movies, he told Dan trapping is out. So Dan did as what his friend and instructor told him. He took it out. Now that stuff was later added in as part of like a overall thing, but I'll get to that. Okay, so in the early 2000s, when the Bruce Lee estate formed uh, these copyrights on all these things, they made the martial art officially called Jan Fan Jeet Kune Do, which incorporated both Jan Fan Kung Fu and Jeet Kune Do. But back in the 90s, his 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 uh, his wife, Linda Lee Caldwell, well, she had remarried, so it's Caldwell now. But Linda Lee Caldwell had formed something with, like I said, his previous students called the Jun Fan. No, I'm sorry, the Jeet Kune Do Nucleus or something like that. It disbanded sometime in the early 2000s, but it was a group that was supposed to like keep alive the knowledge of Bruce Lee and his martial arts, and to show people where to find qualified instructors. But Dan Inosanto was invited, but he declined respectfully because he thought it was kind of misinformative of these students calling what they did Jeet Kune Do, because Dao of Kung Fu and Jun Fan Kung Fu were not Jeet Kune Do. And it was funny because, like I said, I'm not going to mention the member of the Bruce Lee estate, but she, back in the 2000s, said that Jeet Kune Do was basically just Wing Chun Kung Fu, Western boxing, and fencing. And that's just categorically false. You can see it in the kicks. And I'm not just talking about from the movies. Even if you go to like an actual Jeet Kune Do school and you see how they kick and so forth, whether you're talking about a original Jeet Kune Do school or Jeet Kune Do concepts or whatever, the kicks are clearly based in Savate and Muay Thai and even Filipino martial arts. The Filipino martial arts was something added more as something separate to Jeet Kune Do. So even in the so-called debate between original Jeet Kune Do and Jeet Kune Do concepts, what they were calling original Jeet Kune Do was just Jan Fan Kung Fu, which is still a curriculum at any Jeet Kune Do concepts school. As a matter of fact, to get certified in Jeet Kune Do, you have to learn Jan Fan Kung Fu. And that's taught separately from all the other styles. So if you want to learn just Jan Fan Kung Fu, you can. But if you also want to learn the other Jeet Kune Do techniques that came out of Jeet Kune Do proper, you can learn that. And they'll have it like on basic, intermediate, and advanced. And then you also have like Muay Thai, you have Savate, boxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, stuff like that. And so just to be clear, so some of the styles that were specifically influencing Jeet Kune Do, and I'm not going to mention all 26 styles, was again Wing Chun, Savate, Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, and that's catch can wrestling specifically, judo. Bruce Lee loved judo. He, I believe, wanted Brandon Lee to actually learn judo as his first martial art. He really liked judo. Okay. I believe also some jujitsu. Um, the, Ironically, there was no direct influence of either karate or taekwondo, despite both friends of Bruce Lee, Jun Ree, the so-called father of American Taekwondo, and Chuck Norris, who studied Tang Soto, which is another Korean style, but more heavily influenced by Shotokan karate. They both claim to have taught him to high kick, which I don't think was true. He just thought high kicking was impractical until he studied. Excuse me, until he started studying other arts like Savat. Uh, and I'm sure I think Junri did influence him as far as his spinning heel kick. I think that was an influence on Bruce Lee because you see that in all his movies. And I broke it down in another video previously that Jeet can be separated in three ways as far as the stuff he did for films, the stuff he did for demonstrations, and the stuff he taught his students for actual like self-defense or competition. Those were three different breakdowns of Jeet and would look different based on the purpose. Stuff in the for demonstrations are made to look flashy and catch the audience eye. Stuff for the movies has to be flashy but also exaggerated so it won't be practical. And that's for all martial arts, not just Jeet Kune. When you do martial arts in film, anyone will tell you this done fight choreography. Things have to be exaggerated and telegraphed in a way that would make it impractical to do in like real fighting. And then the stuff for self-defense and competition, he was not a fan of kicking high in self-defense situations. We always will say that high kicks were impractical, and I would no sooner kick you in the head than I would punch you in the foot. But there are high kicks in Jeet Kune Do. It's just that they're taught sparingly. They're used sparingly, and most of those high kicks come from Savat. Okay, because the Filipino kicks are all low line kicks as well, from like Panan Jackman or Sikaran. So this is getting long again, so I'm gonna keep it. I just want to tie up loose ends here. I wanted to emphasize the fact that his original students, who didn't later join Dan and Santo and become certified in Jeet Kune Do, were not qualified to teach Jeet Kune Do and were being disingenuous, calling what they did original Jeet Kune Do, and then trying to say that Jeet Kune Do concepts wasn't real Jeet Kune Do, that he was just teaching arts under Bruce Lee's name and calling it Jeet Kune Do. They were not. Okay, it's just that if you were in a Jeet Kune Do school, you might learn stuff like Kali, Eskrima, Arnis, um, Silat, Muay Thai, stuff like that. Muay Thai was something Bruce was big on himself, except that he didn't have the exposure to it as did Dan DeSanto later did himself, because with Chai Sarasute, Ajarn Chai Sarasute, Ajarn being an honorific meaning like master or teacher, but more like master teacher. He became friends with Dan and brought Muay Thai and started the Muay Thai Association. I think I got that right, MTBA, in the U.S. and was under the Inosanto Academy. And Dan made it so that you had to learn Muay Thai to learn Jeet Kune Do. And the heavy influence became what I specialize in, Jeet Kune Do kickboxing, which is mostly Muay Thai and Savat and Filipino dirty boxing and Western boxing. Okay, you see very little trapping in it, very little grappling. And I was out of the fray between the original JKD and JKD concepts camps, because the guy I learned under, well, people don't know him, Sifu Tom, he was a direct student of Larry Hartzell, Sifu Larry Hartzell, which was one of Bruce Lee's original students, who became certified later under Dan Inosanto. He also was one of those people that taught the Dallas Cowboys back when they were kicking butt back in like the like 90s or whatever. In any case, when it came to that whole controversy of what is Jeet Kune Do, what isn't Jeet Kune Do, he was remembered to always have said, just shut up and train. That was his thing, shut up and train. And it makes sense because most of the people having these armchair discussions about shut up and train is a good mantra. And like I said, most of these people having these armchair discussions about martial arts in general, not just Jeet Kune Do, probably don't train that much. Because if you got time to be sitting there uh, in a long thread of comments for hours on end, that's time you could have been working out. That's how I see it. Um, I work out 2 hours every morning, and I try to do something in the evening. But if I don't, at least I know that my 2 hours in the morning had me covered for basic stuff, right? So, and anyway, Larry Harcel would have came under the JKD concepts, um, but again, he didn't pick sides because he thought it was silly, and it is, and it was. Um, then you have some people in the original Jeet Kune Do camp that do teach Jeet Kune Do and certified to teach Jeet Kune Do proper, not just John Fan Gung Fu or Dao of Gung Fu, but they reject Dan and saying that he took it too far, emphasizing the other Southeast Asian arts when he was just exploring different martial arts, which is what Bruce was doing. He was exploring different martial arts. That's why his art, his system changed from 3 different styles over time because he kept researching stuff and showing interest in things that he didn't know about previously. I'm pretty sure he would have kept doing that if he stayed alive longer. But in any case, those things were separate from John Fan Gung Fu, which was taught separately. Dan doesn't certify anyone in Jeet Kune Do itself. What he does is he gives them certification in John Fan Gung Fu, which allows them to teach Jeet Kune Do. He's only actually given very few people certification in Jeet Kune Do itself. That being Brandon Lee, Bruce's son, of course, because at one point he hoped that Brandon would take over the reins of the martial art for him. But Brandon wanted to be an actor strictly instead of just a martial artist. Understandable. But he certified Brandon in all 3 of his arts: Dao Gung Fu, Jun Fan Gung Fu, and Jeet Kune Do. Um, and Taki Kimura, Bruce's best friend from a long time ago, was certified in John Fan Gung Fu, as I mentioned in the previous video. And he's ranked higher than Dan. So Dan, out of respect, always refers to him as his senior. But Taki didn't go around teaching Jeet Kune Do, as far as I know, and only certified his son in John Fan Gung Fu. Now, I think his son is now an instructor that teaches people, but Taki himself didn't. I don't know if that was for health reasons or not, but that was the case. And then there was James Lee, who was another best friend of Bruce, who was also certified in John Fan Gung Fu, but died at an early age in the 60s, which was hit C.J. Bruce pretty hard, up from what I've heard. And then there was his other close friend, Ted Wong. Ted Wong was said to have been certified in Jeet Kune Do, but again, I'm agnostic about it. But I do know that Dan said he was the only one who was actually certified in Jeet Kune Do itself and at the level of being an instructor. Now, maybe Ted Wong did get certified, but he wasn't, but his certification didn't rank him at the same level as Dan to actually teach. But a lot of the people in the original JKD camp follow under Ted Wong, because Ted Wong only teaches Jeet Kune Do because he never was as curious as Dan to explore these other arts. So he taught strictly like Jeet Kune Do and what he was taught of Wing Chun by Bruce Lee. Another guy, Jerry Poteet, who had a student in that Black Belt magazine comment thread that disagreed with me, was certified under Dan. He was one of the first generation of students that came from Bruce Lee, but he was certified under Dan Inosanto, but later rejected the Inosanto Academy because he wasn't interested in learning the other stuff. And that's fine. If you don't want to learn the other stuff, that's cool. But don't sit there and shit on the people who want to learn that other stuff, saying what they're doing is not Jeet Kune. Okay, no one said it was, but the fact of the matter is that they want to learn as much as they can. I don't see what's the problem with that. If you strictly went there and wanted to learn Jeet Kune, that's fine. But don't say what the other people are doing isn't Jeet Kune when you learned the very same stuff that you are currently teaching as Jeet Kune from them. So that's where I wanted to wrap it up at, guys, because it was just really confusing, and I thought I had covered all the loose ends, but I don't think I had, and I still may not have. So please ask me questions respectfully, please. But um, that is the gist of it. That John Fan Gung Fu is not Jeet Kune Do. They're two separate styles that are part of the same Bruce Lee system. Okay, John Fan Jeet Kune Do, but it was an earlier art that he practiced in the in the mid to late 50s, which later became Jeet Kune Do as he further researched other things. And like I said, Jeet Kune Do proper has very little trapping in it. The trapping and stuff that you see Jeet Kune Do people are doing is because Dan added Wing Chun Kung Fu. He himself learned the 108 wooden dummy form, um, and also learned trapping from other Chinese martial arts and from Filipino martial arts and from Silat, which is a martial art that's spread over like 5 different countries: Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, Timor-Leste, and even part of southern Thailand. So, in any case, when Ron Balicki was doing that drill, I wasn't wrong in saying it was a Jeet Kune Do drill because it's a drill that's taught in Jeet Kune Do schools. And I also said that it was from Salat, Penchak Salat. I don't know why that was confusing, but unfortunately, as I was saying in the previous video, there's a lot of magical minded people that gravitate to Asian martial arts for some reason. Um, that's why you get a lot of goofy people that learn Asian martial arts, because they go there because they're thinking it's something exotic and mystical and stuff like that. So it doesn't always track the most critical thinking people, unfortunately. And so be it. But I still love martial arts and I love Jeet Kune Do. And I love many other martial arts like Savat and Muay Thai. And like I said, if people are confused, all you have to do is look at actual Savat. Like look at videos here on YouTube, and you'll see just how much Jeet Kune Do looks like that in motion, with the footwork and the kicks. It's pretty palpable that that is not uh, John Fan Gung Fu, because there's no there are no there's no dynamic kicks in Wing Chun Kung Fu. Boxing has absolutely no kicks, as we all know, and fencing is only with swords. So where you will learn to kick like that from those 3 styles is just absurd. And if people want to say, well, those Salat drills and stuff like that isn't Jeet Kune Do, okay. But John Fan Kung Fu isn't Jeet Kune Do either. But as I always say, I'm just a contrarian. Hope that helped.